Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the fascinating core of what makes us, well, us. Today, we're plunging into something we all talk about, something we often judge, but frequently misunderstand. Personality. Think about it. How often do we hear someone say, oh, they're so charming and outgoing, they must have a wonderful personality? Or maybe the opposite, they're a bit quiet and reserved, so maybe their personality isn't that great. But let's take two people. Say, there's Rohan. Impeccably dressed, articulate, a real intellectual powerhouse. Yet, he's notoriously arrogant, constantly cuts off his friends, and is quite rude to his own parents. Then there's Ruchi, kind of unassuming in her appearance, not a top student maybe. But she's the most wonderful friend, always polite and genuinely kind to everyone. If you're like most people, your initial quick judgments about Rohan and Ruchi's personalities, well, they might start to crumble when you look at their actual behavior. Right?
Exactly. And this is precisely where psychology steps in to dramatically redefine our everyday understanding. In a psychological context, personality isn't really about those superficial first impressions or even external appearance at all. Instead, it's defined as an individual's deeply ingrained characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Patterns that, endure throughout their life. It's truly about the internal blueprint that guides us.
So our mission today is to unpack that true meaning. We're going to delve into the myriad, often invisible factors that truly shape who we are. We'll explore the different psychological lenses, the perspectives through which we can study personality, and then perhaps most fascinatingly, uncover how this intricate concept is actually measured. We've pulled together a rich collection of academic sources to guide us, so we should get a thorough, well-rounded, and genuinely insightful deep dive. Let's get started.
Okay. To really grasp the concept of personality, it actually helps to rewind a bit to its linguistic origins. The word personality itself stems from the Latin word persona, which literally means mask. Back in ancient Greece, you see, stage actors would wear these distinct masks to portray different characters. So in its very earliest interpretations, personality became associated with the idea of projected behavior, what someone presented to the world, almost like a role they played.
That's a great historical anchor, but it sounds almost superficial, like we're just talking about an act. As psychology evolved, so did these definitions, right?
Absolutely.
Like Gordon Allport, a hugely influential psychologist, he defined personality as the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determines his unique adjustments to the environment. That phrase, dynamic organization, really jumps out at me. So it's not static, it's actively responding, evolving.
Yes, absolutely. And that dynamic aspect is key. It really highlights how incredibly complex personality is. It's not shaped by just one or two things. It's influenced by a wide variety of factors that are constantly interacting, weaving together everything from our biology to our broader culture to create the unique tapestry of who we are.
That makes perfect sense. So, knowing personality is deeply internal and dynamic, what's the very first building block? Is it something we're born with, or is it entirely shaped by our environment? Let's start with heredity. This covers all those characteristics we inherit from our parents, not just physical traits like height or eye color,
Right.
but also elements of our mental makeup. These inherent characteristics can even subtly influence our self-concept, which in turn helps shape our overall personality.
And beyond those visible traits, our internal chemistry plays a surprisingly critical role. Think about our endocrine glands like the pituitary, thyroid, or adrenals. They're vital in shaping personality. It's quite incredible how our biology, right down to our hormones, can literally rewire our emotional landscape. Take the thyroid, for instance. It produces thyroxine. Now, too much or too little thyroxine isn't just a physical issue. An over or under secretion can profoundly alter your baseline mood. It can lead to things like nervous tension, irritability, restlessness, and emotional instability, basically shaping the very texture of your daily personality.
Wow, so even our thyroid can influence our personality. Yeah, that's not something I would have intuitively linked. And it's not just biology, is it? Our immediate environment is hugely impactful. The family, of course, has got to be one of the most important factors.
Definitely.
Think about it. The family structure, their socioeconomic status, the emotional, academic, cultural environment at home, the way family members interact, and especially the child-rearing practices parents use, all these elements have significant lasting effects.
Indeed. And we see really stark contrasts in development based on these factors. For example, in a warm, emotionally supportive family, where parents have healthy relationships with their children, show genuine love, respect, it significantly boosts a child's self-confidence and self-esteem. This fosters a more positive personality development. But on the flip side, things like overprotection, rejection, or negligence from parents, well, that can result in low self-esteem and have very negative, long-lasting effects on personality.
And then as we grow, our world expands beyond the family. The peer group becomes incredibly influential. Peers are just such a pervasive aspect of our social lives, aren't they? From early childhood all the way to old age.
Absolutely. Classmates, colleagues.
Classmates, colleagues in the workplace, members of a sports club, and this influence, it can be both profoundly positive and, unfortunately, quite negative. Being in good company might lead to strong study habits or healthy attitudes. But negative influences, well, they can foster unhealthy habits like bunking lectures, addictions, or even aggressive tendencies and bullying. It's truly a double-edged sword.
It absolutely is. And the school environment also plays an undeniably significant role. Things like the teaching learning process itself, academic activities, co-curricular facilities the school provides, the rapport teachers have with students, even school discipline and policies, all these have a profound impact. Think about a creative, well-qualified, and well-mannered teacher. They act as a powerful role model, right? They actively provide opportunities for optimal student development, which in turn helps students develop a healthier, more adaptive personality.
And in our incredibly connected modern world, we definitely can't ignore mass media. The internet, TV, mobile phones, computers, I mean, they're deeply integrated into almost everyone's daily lives now. They provide entertainment, informal education, socialization, for better or worse, maybe?
Well, yes. While mass media can certainly offer updated knowledge, connect us to global perspectives, which can positively affect personality, there's a significant flip side. Excessive addiction to media can cause real problems. Things like disconnection from the world, egocentrism, sleep deprivation, poor academic performance, insecurity, antisocial behaviors, and loneliness. This kind of digital overload can severely and adversely affect an individual's personality development. It's a real challenge today.
Yeah, it really is. Finally, let's touch on culture. Each culture has its own unique set of values, beliefs, norms. These deeply embedded cultural factors don't just influence what we think, but how we think, feel, and behave. For example, qualities like leadership or listening skills, maybe entrepreneurial drive, or tendencies to cooperate. They can differ greatly from culture to culture, leading to quite distinct personality profiles among people from different backgrounds.
So given all these intricate factors shaping us, psychologists have developed various lenses, you could say, or perspectives to study personality. There are about 5 main approaches, and each one fundamentally shifts how you approach understanding someone. You've got the psychoanalytic perspective, which dives deep into early childhood experiences, the unconscious mind, asking what unconscious drives are at play. Then there's the humanistic perspective, focusing on free will, self-actualization, psychological growth. The trait perspective basically assumes individuals possess specific, measurable traits in varying amounts, leading to unique personalities. The type perspective categorizes people into unique personality types, often linked to physique or temperament. And finally, the social cognitive perspective highlights the importance of observational learning and cognitive processes. See how different those starting points are.
They really are like entirely different maps to the same territory.
Okay, let's deep dive into some key theories now. Starting with a classic from that type perspective, Carl Jung's theory of personality. Jung famously classified people into 2 broad categories, introverts and extroverts. Introverts tend to look within themselves for stimulation. They're often seen as shy, reserved, prefer working alone, maybe avoid extensive social contact. Extroverts, on the other hand, are energized by external stimulation. They're social, outgoing, mix easily, and typically prefer jobs involving people.
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting and maybe debunks a common misconception. In real life, very few people are completely introverted or completely extroverted. Most of us are actually ambivert.
Ambiverts.
An ambivert individual has a blend of traits from both introversion and extroversion, falling somewhere in the middle of that continuum. It highlights that personality isn't always rigid, you know? It's often fluid and situational. Shows just how nuanced our social energy can be. That makes so much sense. Okay, let's shift gears to the trait perspective with Allport's theory of personality. Gordon Allport, an American psychologist. He famously identified this massive number, like 18,000 separate terms that could describe personality.
18,000.
Yeah. He defined a trait as a relatively enduring and consistent way of thinking, feeling, and acting. So if you possess a trait, it's consistently found in your behavior over time. But 18,000 terms, how did he make sense of that?
Well, he organized them into 3 fascinating categories to provide some structure. First, the cardinal trait. This is a single dominating trait that shapes a person's entire life, making them known specifically for it. These are quite rare, but powerful. Think about truthfulness in Mahatma Gandhi, or humanitarianism in Mother Teresa,
Well,
or ambition in Napoleon Bonaparte, maybe power in Julius Caesar. These are striking examples of cardinal traits that define their very existence. Second are central traits. These are the more general characteristics that form the basic foundation of a person's personality. Allport suggested there are typically maybe 5 to 10 such traits that best describe an individual. These are the building blocks, really, the adjectives you'd use to describe someone to a friend. Things like sensitivity, sociability, self-confidence, diligence, honesty, that kind of thing. And finally, we have secondary traits. These are much more situational and narrow in their effect. They play a minor role because they only appear in specific circumstances, like getting anxious when speaking to a large group, or maybe being impatient while waiting in a long queue. Well, those are secondary traits that might only surface in particular contexts, not all the time.
Right. So from Allport's brilliant work, other psychologists tried to distill those countless traits into something more manageable and more universal, which led us to perhaps the most widely accepted model today. The big five-factor model of personality, often remembered by the acronym OCEAN,
That's the one.
developed by Robert McCrae and Paul Costa. This model proposes 5 major factors or traits considered basic tendencies likely rooted in biology. And they interact with external influences like culture to shape our skills, habits, tastes, values.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's break down each of those 5 foundational factors quickly. O stands for openness to experience. This trait reflects an appreciation for art, emotion, adventure, unusual ideas, creativity, imagination, curiosity. People high in openness are curious, imaginative, embrace novelty. Those low in it tend to be more conventional, practical, perhaps less interested in aesthetics. C is for conscientiousness. This is the tendency to display self-discipline, organization, control impulses. Highly conscientious people. They're usually well-organized, responsible, dependable, hardworking. Those low in conscientiousness are often well unorganized, maybe more spontaneous, careless, less focused on long-term goals, perhaps. E is for extroversion. This trait characterizes the breadth of activities someone engages in and where they get their energy, typically from external social means. People high in extroversion are talkative, enthusiastic, sociable, assertive.
The classic extrovert.
Pretty much. Those low in extroversion are less talkative, maybe shy, prefer solitude, and might find big social gatherings draining. A is for agreeableness. This shows an individual's ability to get along with people, their concern for social harmony. Highly agreeable individuals tend to be kind, loving, caring, friendly, cooperative. Those low in agreeableness can sometimes be uncooperative, maybe jealous, hostile, or argumentative. And finally, N is for neuroticism. This trait reflects a tendency to experience negative emotions, things like anger, anxiety, or depression. People high in neuroticism are often anxious, irritable, maybe fearful, impulsive, emotionally unstable. Conversely, those low in neuroticism tend to be more balanced, calm, and emotionally stable.
And what's truly compelling about the Big Five model is how it seems to provide a kind of universal roadmap for understanding human differences, even across cultures. It offers a surprisingly accurate snapshot of who we are just by measuring these 5 dimensions. Okay, so we've covered what personality is and what shapes it. Now, how do psychologists actually measure something so intricate and internally driven? They use various methods, right?
They do. One broad category is behavioral analysis, where observation is key. The most common method here is probably the interview. An interviewer asks various questions to collect information, but they're also looking at nonverbal cues, the time taken to answer, gestures, posture, body movements.
Oh, those little things.
Exactly. Interviews can be structured with predetermined questions in sequence. You often see these used by industrial psychologists for job selection, where consistency is really important. Or they can be unstructured, where questions are adapted on the spot based on responses. This is more common for clinical, counseling, health, sports psychologists who need more detailed, nuanced info.
And another behavioral method is direct observation. This means watching an individual in various situations, like observing how a child behaves when the teacher isn't in the classroom, or how a factory worker acts when the supervisor isn't present. But it sounds straightforward. But for observation to be truly helpful and unbiased, it needs to be done by a trained observer with clear objectives, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's much harder than it looks to get objective data that way. Then we move on to self-report inventories. These are techniques where individuals provide information about their own personality. Basically, they respond to a set of questions or statements in a specific inventory or questionnaire. The key here is relying on the individual's self-perception.
Right, and there's some really well-known examples. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the MMPI.
A big one.
Yeah, it's actually the most frequently used personality test in mental health settings because it's been so rigorously validated. Then there's Cattell's 16 personality factors and the popular Myers-Briggs type indicator, the MBTI. Although it's worth noting, while the MBTI is widely used, say, in corporate settings for team building, its scientific validation is often debated.
That's true. It's often seen more as a tool for self-reflection rather than a strict clinical diagnostic tool. And finally, we have the projective methods. These tests emerged primarily from the psychoanalytic school of thought. The idea is to uncover feelings, desires, conflicts that are hidden at the unconscious level. In these tests, an individual responds freely to relatively unstructured or ambiguous materials like ink blots or pictures. They essentially project their own personalities onto the stimulus, often revealing personal conflicts, motivations, coping styles, things they might not even be consciously aware of.
And there are some really famous examples here. First, Rorschach's ink blot test, developed by Hermann Rorschach way back in 1921. It uses those 10 irregular ink blots, some black and white, some color and subjects, just to describe what they see. But it's crucial to note, analyzing this test requires a highly trained and skillful examiner because the interpretation is so subjective.
Very much so.
Then there's the thematic apperception test, or TEAT, developed by Morgan and Murray in 1935. Here, individuals interpret a series of pictures by telling a full story about each scene, what led up to it, what's happening now, what the consequences will be.
Trying to uncover underlying themes.
Exactly. It allows insight into their underlying themes and concerns. And a more straightforward one is the sentence completion test. Individuals are given a series of incomplete sentences like, I feel anxious when, or I feel afraid of, or when someone troubles me, and they just complete them in their own words. While these projective tests offer a fascinating window into the unconscious, they're also quite debated in psychology, mainly due to their reliance on examiner interpretation and less standardized scoring, which raises questions about their scientific rigor compared to something like the MMPI.
That's a fair point. There's definitely ongoing discussion about their validity and reliability. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's abundantly clear that personality is a far cry from just superficial appearances. It's a dynamic, incredibly multifaceted concept. It's shaped by this intricate dance between our heredity, our environment, our individual experiences. And thankfully, psychologists have developed some pretty sophisticated ways, from deep interviews to complex inventories and these fascinating projective techniques to try and understand and measure this ever-evolving core aspect of the human condition.
Absolutely. It's truly far more than just surface-level impressions. So thinking about all this, what does understanding these many layers of personality mean for how you interact with others, or even how you perceive yourself and your own unique adjustments to the complex environment we all navigate? Something to think about until our next deep dive.